See, I grew up 15 minutes from New Madrid County, Missouri. So I knew all about it, and I remember what 1990, what Dr. Browning predicted the earthquake, what December 3rd. So I still remember that. So I mean, it was that.
Yes.
I mean, it's ingrained in my head.
I've been through some major ones. I've lived through one in Alaska when I was a kid in '59. I've been through 8/0 earthquakes in Mexico City. In one of those, 10,000 people perished. And let me tell you that I've observed, and I lived in California and other places on the planet have been hit by these. Earthquakes don't scare me. Bad engineering scares me. So something in the New Madrid area, and in fact that whole region, is that brick, unreinforced masonry, will crumble and cave in on you. And so what you need to pay attention to are these things called the triangle voids of life. When the 10,000 people died, some of them in Mexico City, and in other areas, in BAM, in Pakistan, or Turkey, or Iran, I can't remember at the moment. Anyway, they would always find people that were alive 6 weeks later, 3 weeks later, in the huge amounts of rubble, and they always survive in little triangular voids against areas where the stuff cannot collapse. So if you're in an office all day, keep your eye on very full file cabinets, because they can't compress. And so right next to them, a triangular void will be created, that sort of thing. You can read up on it on the internet, and it makes lots of sense.
Sure.
But it makes sense to prepare. The government certainly is.
Yeah, well, I know when I lived in Arkansas in the 90s, they actually had some earthquake preparedness classes in Little Rock, because Little Rock will be affected when New Madrid goes. So even back then, 10, 15 years ago, they were thinking about it.
Well, here's the difference now. We find ourselves in a time of staggering fiscal dislocation, they call it, basically meltdown. Our federal government is reeling under the effects of this, even internally at a much greater level than what they're letting on. And yet they're still putting money towards preparing for a very large sort of an event in that area. And the issue here is also complicated by some woo-woo stuff. Years ago, and I'm talking about in like the late 90s, they're circulated on the internet at that time, and also off of it, a document that came out that referenced 3 elements of control of the United States. And those 3 elements involved the large storm that we called Katrina, the terrorist attack, and a large earthquake. Now, the earthquake that was referenced in the document was non-specific, but there were some words seeming to indicate California. But in my view, it could have just as easily been referencing New Madrid. And so the fact that the government had these 3 items picked way back when, and they always end up in these things, 2 out of the 3 have happened.
Yeah.
And curiously, of course, every time the government has a big exercise on or around that day, we get one of these events happening. It's a big, I'm going to sit here with my pie and think about that.
And so that sort of leads me to my question about 2011. I see that you have data gaps. Can you explain that to us?
When I originally assigned values to the words, I assigned them in particular data ranges of immediacy data. Some words are very effective very quickly. Usually they're slang words. They don't have a long-term duration, but they may have a high immediacy impact. Then there are these words, for instance, that have a long-term duration. They're with us for generation after generation, and they never seem to lose their emotional impact, and/or it grows over time. Those are the long-term value sets. In between is obviously the shorter term, in between immediacy and longer term. When I collect the data, I noticed a curious situation forming in which there were holes in existing data sets that were simply not getting filled up as we approached through 2011 and moved into 2012 as I shift my model space. And I can get into the details if you want, but most people probably would find it extremely boring. But basically what happened is that I don't have a good sense from this. It doesn't seem to be a good sign, but our data granularity fades in a very specific fashion in the movement of model space through 2011 and into 2012, as though there is as though that all of the humans around here have something far better to do, or are far more occupied, and are not able to be as we are now in terms of chatting about the internet, watching TV, et cetera, et cetera. It's not definitive, and just because I have a data gap, it could be simply a very complex artifact of my own programming, which we're still examining for that, because the programs are quite complex to begin with. There's 200 plus of them, so it certainly could be that, but there is an element of disquiet I have in how this thing forms, and I would have to say that if anything, it would tend to suggest that chaos gets really out of hand, and the pressures on the planet are such that the social order really breaks down over these next 2 years.
That's interesting. People keep asking me about is it because of a revolution? Is it because the government turns the internet off? Is it because
the internet being shut off would not in and of itself cause the language to have this particular pattern this early. It obviously shuts down my data source, but it doesn't in and of itself intrude on the forecast component of the language itself. So in other words, if the internet had been shut off in 2009, I wouldn't have any data right now, and I'd have a big gap. But that's not the kind of gap we're seeing, because the internet is still running and the gap is forming within the data. So it's an issue of something, I think, relative to humans, because maybe there's another element in there too. It may be that for some reason, some spectacular hit, that we have one other innocuous reason that this could occur would be that we would become so spoken about that it basically made our technology useless, and I could never filter out our own stuff, and therefore we couldn't do any more runs, and therefore the data sets would disappear over time. That still has some small level of probability, but it would have to be, in my opinion, it'd have to be fairly staggering in terms of getting that many people's attention.
So, with that type of information, is there something, I guess I'm trying to figure out, is there something we do to prepare for that? Or what you do is collect data, it's up to us to use the data?
Now, it doesn't quite work that way. It's up to you guys to create it, because everybody's prescient, everybody's psychic, and we're leaking it out through our language. Now, it could be, as I say, an artifact of the programming. In other words, I could be wrong in the sense that it could be that the internet goes down, not in a totality sense, but becomes so censored as to become useless to me. That also, at one level, I could see that causing the problem. But if so, then we're looking at a situation between now and, say, March of next year. The internet would have to have become so ratcheted down that probably shows like yours wouldn't be allowed.
Well, that makes
because
sense.
Places that would have chat rooms and forums attached would be the areas that we would act as our data source.
And it's easy to point out too. We talk a lot about free speech, but we actually have a lot of censorship. And of course, folks on TV are only allowed to say what the owner of that corporation that owns the station allows them to say.
Sure, and in the United States, if we look at our language, we were never really promised free speech. We were promised freedom of the press. And the problem is, it's only free if you own the press.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's another, if you're just going into that, because I've given a lot of thought to this, we are experiencing that censorship now, because, for instance, our site is banned in China. And not only is our site banned, but many of the activities I would use to gather Chinese language sources are banned, because I'm not able to get an effective ping back onto my ID, because my ID is banned relative to the half-past human domain. So I'm cut off from vast areas of what the Chinese are thinking, and I'm also now cut off from areas in Southeast Asia and Australia that just so as they ratchet down on the internet and start trying to exercise control on it, that could indeed be a cause for this. I'm trying to see if there's a pattern that follows from the data itself that would suggest that, but so far no luck.
All right, I have like 2 minutes here. What would be your closing message to everyone?
Giant food crisis coming, giant currency crisis coming. Prepare now. Every single day is going to give you that much more of an edge on what's going to occur.
Oh, perfect. Well, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you sending everyone our way. Tell everyone we are going to replay it. I believe that you sent so many people our way that our servers might have crashed. So we are going to replay this first thing at 7:10 Central Time next Tuesday. This whole interview will be replayed for everybody if they want to tune in.
Okay. And let me know if we can do it again, guys.
Yeah, this is fun. We appreciate it's an honor because it's definitely an honor.
Yes, thank you so much, Clif.
You're just talking to an old bald guy.
Oh, no, this is amazing.
This is amazing, and we definitely appreciate your time.
Sure, no worries.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was Clif High. He was from halfpasthuman.com. Amazing. I recommend to everyone if you're, you want to know what the internet's thinking. I believe this guy has the answer, and I'm just amazed at some of the accuracy. Like he said, the words that he's picking up, the high level of accuracy and what he's picking up is amazing.
It's I need to go. So he has a newsletter, right?
Yeah,
I need to subscribe to that newsletter.
I think the 9th one came out January the 25th.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, January 25th, I bought it. So
I definitely need to pick that up because he has some fascinating information that I think we can each apply to our personal lives. Now, he just said food and currency crises. Well, what do? Well, we start making sure we have some groceries on the shelves and some money in the bank. There's things we can do on a personal level.
Yeah, maybe not even money in the bank. I mean, maybe money at home just to because
having some cash. Okay, exactly.
Yeah.
Getting out of debt. Just the very practical things that will bring you ahead of the game.
Yeah. Who knows? I still have a ton of questions to ask.
I know.
It's just amazing the level of detail and how accurate. And this guy he sounds very intelligent and smart. And,
yes.
And we'll have him on again in the future, and hopefully he doesn't send so many people our way he does something to our system, or maybe the system shut us down.
Ooh,
so,
dun.
Yeah,
well, and his website is
halfpasthuman.com.
Yes, so you can email him if you have additional questions.
Yeah, or email him, or there's a bunch of web chat forums and stuff. So we'll be on live again next Tuesday, and if you're listening, we are going to replay this whole interview in full. 7:10, we'll start that interview live Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're on 7 to 9, and we'll be on RadioRichandFriends.com.